Halo Infinite Zeta Halo is full of beautiful natural and synthetic scenery, but scattered amongst the fragments of the ring are banished and UNSC outposts which act as key progression points for the player throughout the campaign, some being fortified wreckage, and others strategic strongholds that the banished use to further their campaign to seize the ring for their own. If you've played the campaign, you've definitely heard some of the audio logs and have picked up on some of the implied story behind these locations, so strap in and get ready for some more Halo lore. One of the core differences in the experience of fighting the Banished compared to the Covenant is the felt presence of the former's infrastructure. Assembly forges, communication outposts, munition factories. These things were seldom seen in previous games because they were not typically deployed, but hosted in centralized locations, such as High Charity, cruisers, and support ships. It was rarely in the Covenant's interest to occupy human colonies for extended periods and set up external infrastructure unless there was something of value that they were pursuing, as the conclusion to their assaults often ended the same way, glassing the world from orbit. This is not the case for the Banished, and the Horn of Abolition stood as one such example of why. This outpost was utilized to link and relay communications throughout the immense Banished presence spread across the vast surface of Zeta Halo, while also tracking remnants of the UNSC resistance. Escharum saw this outpost as a symbol of the Banished strength, of many being forged into one under the unifying might of Atriox. As heard in the Nowhere to Hide audio log of the Outpost intel, 2 Marines attempted to destroy the outpost with their last C-12 satchel, but the landslide only took out a single building, which did little to deter the site's Ungoi commander, Jotmop, from his duties. The UNSC Mortal Reverie was a Mulsanne-class frigate that crashed on Zeta Halo following the Banished strategic ambush of the UNSC Infinity and its escort fleet. On December 15, 2559, the wreckage of the ship was located by Spartan Vedra Makovich, and it became the centralized base of operations for surviving UNSC forces in this localized area of the ring. This makeshift fortification would not last, however, as the Banished, led by Chieftain Tremonius and Captain Arthok, assaulted the Reverie on January 31st, 2560, and claimed the site for themselves. Escharum rewarded Tremonius for his victory by naming the subsequent outpost in his honor. Among the myriad of Forerunner artifacts, devices, structures, and other objects of interest on Zeta Halo, the stone ring totems have proven to be perhaps the most inscrutable. Even the Monitor Despondent Pyre spent millennia attempting to decipher their engraved runes, which seemingly predate even the Forerunners themselves. The Banished, too, sought to understand these totems, which was the purpose given to the Annex Ridge research facility. This site was placed under the watchful eye of Zeratis, who was among the first to join the Banished and played a key role in the recovery of the slipspace flake within the anodyne spirit of the Ark that enabled Atriox to return to the galaxy. It was Escherum's belief that the technology and artifacts excavated on Zeta Halo were key to the destiny of the Banished. As the Banished were the dominant occupational force on Zeta Halo, setting up a central checkpoint to control transportation routes to other outposts and prevent human access to the ring's remediation systems gave them a key strategic advantage. The Riven Gate effectively trapped UNSC forces in Banished territory, and it was near this location that Spartan Bonita Stone learned of the army being massed to march on the Reverie. The Forge of Tish served as a maintenance depot and production site for the Banished, bolstering their presence and capacity by fabricating and repairing a great number of machines for their distributed forces. This outpost location made it a key site for supporting the excavation efforts at Site Novum, where the Banished were digging into the conservatory. It contained fuel silos and repair bays that were used to maintain the mining equipment used for such a purpose. Managed by Commander Durakis, Escharum kept a close eye on the excavation operation of the conservatory due to the personal interest of the Harbinger, who inspected the site herself. Operating in parallel with the Forge of Tish, Ransom Keep was a smaller maintenance depot that served primarily as a salvage site, harvesting UNSC material across the ring's surface and grinding their titanium bones into feedstock for the Banished's own purposes. While stripping UNSC hardware to repair and maintain Site Novum's excavation equipment, a lone M808 Scorpion remained in Ransom Keep's vehicle bay. Whether the Banished intended to use one of the humans' own machines against them, or simply hadn't gotten around to breaking it down, is still unclear. The excavation sites themselves were identified by Yato Ratuman as scouts. This Sanghili served the Banished on the Ark before returning to the galaxy with Atriox. He was the sole survivor of a mining operation that was decimated by artillery fire, and promised fellow Commander Vimo Arak that he would one day tell him of his time at the Great Foundry of the Forerunners. The Armory of Reckoning was the outpost that was personally installed by Escharum himself for the purpose of conducting repairs, as well as servicing and maintaining the Banished's extensive and deadly arsenal of weapons. This outpost would receive necessary supplies and materials, such as alloys, from Ransom Keep. Munitions printers were so extensively used that the Armory of Reckoning was just down to 3 functioning units by the time that Master Chief arrived to take the site down. Recovered audio files from the envoy known as High Sumpter Bing Flip have detailed an attempted coup at this outpost following a shortage of meat. Bannox, commander of the Armory of Reckoning, put down these insubordinate Jiralhane and decreed that any further infighting would be punished by death after the situation caught Escherum's eye. As the most critical substation for supplying banished forces beyond the House of Reckoning, its continued operational status was a matter of vital importance. The Redoubt of Sundering was a processing outpost for prisoners who were brutally detained and monitored before they were sent to the dreaded halls of the Tower, where they were left to the mercy of Chak Lok. Escharum noted that while the human forces had been laid low to ensure the banished occupational dominance, the survivors were persistent and tenacious, but would divulge the location of their fellows after Chak Lok had attended them. For this reason, Escharum commanded that any human survivors should be kept alive and brought to this harrowing redoubt. Kaiden Thav Sebrum was the resident commander of this outpost, a Sangheili who was renowned for the wanton slaughter he committed at the Battle of Harrow, where a city siege resulted in over 700,000 human civilian deaths. Commonly known as Chak Lok's Tower, this was a heavily fortified stronghold under the terrible control of the sadistic banished warlord, used to violently torture and interrogate enemy soldiers in ways that would lend new meaning to the words Palace of Pain. Those who survived Chak Lok and his machines, beaten and broken, were often ferried to the House of Reckoning to make their final stand. Combat medic Lucas Browning found himself brought to this location after Escharum forced him to release the Harbinger from her Silex. Spartan Hudson Griffin was also brought to the tower after a failed assassination attempt against Escharum in January 2560. After the war chief gave the order for the banished to take the Reverie, Griffin would be held and tortured here for 4 months before the arrival of the Master Chief. And lastly, the House of Reckoning, the final destination for many prisoners who had been processed at the Redoubt of Sundering and ferried through Chak Lok's Tower. The House of Reckoning functioned as Escharum's primary base of operations. Perhaps the most notable feature of the House of Reckoning were the combat zones made from salvaged UNSC structures, filled with weapons and vehicles like a twisted museum, a monument to humanity's failure. Banished troops would keep their skills sharp by pitting themselves against the prisoners of war who were forced to make their last stand here. Alright guys, that was the lore behind all of the Halo Infinite campaign outposts. If you enjoyed watching this video and hearing about all of them, please be sure to like the video and subscribe for more Halo lore content. That's all for this one. I'll see you in the next video.